What's good? What's good? What's good, y'all? It's your boy FCC, aka C Class, and today we got a special guest tuning in. He'll be on the line in a few. We got Chad Marks. He's a very interesting dude because he got a very interesting story. It's a very interesting story. Chad Marks was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. He took his time, became a lawyer, and got himself out. So he's gonna tell y'all the whole story about everything real soon. I just want to get the live going, get everybody in there, get it warmed up. So when Chad Marks step in, we could do this thing. Chad Marks was influential in helping Russell Simmons' son, Jinx the juvy, get his appeal granted. He also working with Guy Fisher. He also has a book. So we're gonna get into all of that in about 5 to 10 minutes. So if any of you guys got any questions about prison reform, you have anybody in prison that needs help getting out, you have anybody in prison that's been sentenced unjustly or wrongly convicted, you should watch this story because he has an organization called the Freedom Fighters, which help people get out. Chad Marks was sentenced to 40 years. He did 17 years out of that 40 years. He's been home for maybe a month or two or so. I'm not sure, but he'll tell y'all exactly how long he's been home. But yeah, definitely gonna get into that story. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm gonna hit up Chad. We could do it. Hit the likes, y'all. Hit the subscribe button. We're gonna get it in, y'all. FCC TV. This is what y'all been waiting for. This is exclusive. Y'all watch the show 50 Cent for Life, the 50 Cent for Life show. Well, this is another version of that show. You know, the prison system is crazy and a lot of things go on, and it's time y'all hear the real deal. So he has a similar story, and you're gonna hear it. He'll be in very soon. Let's get it. Hit the like button, y'all. Hit that subscribe. We about to get it in. 10 people watching. Chad Marks will be in real soon. He'll be in real soon. Hold on. I think he joined in. Hold on. Here we go. Here we go, y'all. Let me fix this screen, make it bigger. I'm excited to do it. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
You're taking them out of here?
We have Chad Marks just stepped in the live. Good afternoon, Chad.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. How are you today?
I'm feeling good, brother. Happy to be here.
Definitely. It's FCC TV, y'all. Today we have Chad Marks. We'll be talking about the Chad Marks story. Chad Marks was recently sentenced to 40 years back in 2003. He took his time, became a lawyer, filed his own work, and got himself out. So we're going to let Chad introduce himself, and then we're going to start from there.
Chad Marks, at the age of 24, I was arrested for a crack cocaine conspiracy with 2 924C counts. I was sentenced to 40 years in prison because I didn't accept the government's plea offer. I went to trial. During my time in prison, I educated myself on the law. I worked hard on my own case, and I was able to put myself in a position to get out of prison. During that time, while I was in prison, I was at USP Big Sandy. From learning the law, I was able to help other people, and I continue to do so, man. So that's kind of like the basis of my story.
So pretty much, tell the people, how did you get into the life of catching the charge? So before we get into the charge, get into the life of catching. What led up to you catching the charge? Tell them where you from. I'm ready from Rochester. Tell them where you from. A little about your background.
I'm from Rochester, New York. I was a crack cocaine dealer, man. Grew up poor. My father was a drug addict. My mother was a single mother. You know, life was rough. It was a struggle. So, you know, I turned to the streets, man, at a young age. At 14, started selling crack. You know, things escalated, and I ended up in federal court, man, with a federal charge for conspiracy to distribute 50 grams or more of crack cocaine with 2 924C charges. Ended up with that 40-year sentence. Went to federal prison. My first prison was Big Sandy. Dangerous place, man. But I knew when I went to prison that there wasn't no one was going to fight for my life like I was going to fight for my life. So there was no other option, man. Failure was not an option. It took me a long time, but I spent most of my time in the law library over there at Big Sandy, and I was able to educate myself on the law. Jailhouse Lawyer, and like I said, man, I just, from what I learned on my own case, I feel like it was a blessing from God, man, where I was able to interpret the law and understand what I was reading, and I'm a good writer. So I was able to use those skills, man, to help other people, like Reggie Owens. He had a 35-year sentence. I helped him get out of prison. Ronnie Lauderdale had a life sentence. I recently got him out of prison in June. He got out 2 days after me, actually.
Oh, wow.
I helped Jinx, Russell Simmons' son. As you know, you interviewed him last week. I was able to step in on his case and get some things done, hopefully get him out of prison, but we want a hearing on his 2255. I mean, that's kind of my story, man.
So question, when you arrested for the crack cocaine charge, was that your first time doing a prison bid?
No, man. Actually, when I was 16, I got arrested for an assault when I was 16. And I went to trial back then, too, and didn't take probation when I probably should have. I went upstate for a 2 to 6 in New York, came home and ended up, going back to the streets and became, started selling crack. And that's how I ended up with that 40-year sentence.
So speak about the plea deal and speak about you getting a 40-year sentence, because you got in the system real young. So what part of your bid did you begin investigating your case and stuff like that? Because I see you started a young bid.
Okay. Well, what happened in my case was this. There was a plea offer in my case. There's a plea offer for 11 to 14 years. But in federal court, they put enhancements on there. And there was a 2-point enhancement for a gun. And I knew because of the gun, I wouldn't be eligible for the drug program, which would take a year off my sentence. So I had told my lawyer, I said, look, I'll take the plea, but if you can, try to get the 2 points off for the gun so I'll be eligible for the drug program. He told me that he was working on it, that was his focus. That didn't end up happening. And what happened was the government ended up superseding the indictment. I started with a mandatory minimum of 10 years, 10 to life. But because of my lawyer's mistakes, by not accepting the plea offer, because he thought he could get a better deal, the government superseded my charges. So my mandatory minimum went from 10 years to 40.
Wow.
And then once I exercised my constitutional right to trial, I had to get that 40-year sentence. I mean, it was a punishment for exercising a constitutional right. A lot of people refer to it as the trial penalty.
So what was it like sitting through the trial? What was it like sitting through the trial knowing that you could possibly do a whole lot of time when you know that you wanted the plea deal? What was that like mentally?
Well, once they superseded the indictment, I knew, there was no way I could get anything less than the 40, unless, of course, the government dropped one of the 924C charges. So sitting through the trial, I thought I'd end up with a life sentence.
Wow.
I was guilty. I mean, there wasn't a chance of me winning, but at that point, I was facing 40 years. So to me, 40 years of life was the same thing. So I was taking my chances and hoping, but I knew in my heart that I was gonna lose, and thought I'd get a life sentence. But actually, my PSI came back life plus 30. They wanted to give me 30 years on top of life. But
what's the PSI? For the people who don't know, what's the PSI?
PSI is the pre-sentence investigation report. The probation department prepares those reports prior to your sentencing. But all the information comes from the U.S. Attorney's Office, from the prosecutors. So they put everything they can in that PSI, that pre-sentence investigation report, to up your sentence. So I was in a pretty bad position, but the judge, when he did sentence me, he said he was going to act in a moment of compassion for my mother. And instead of giving me life, he was going to give me 40 years. That was the mandatory minimum. He couldn't go any lower, even if he wanted to.
And what went through your mind when you actually received the 40 years?
Man, it's hard to explain, man. It was probably the worst thing that ever happened in my life. I think the only thing that could be any worse than that is, something happens to my mother. But other than that, that's the worst thing ever happened in my life, man.
So dealing with the lawyer you had a paid lawyer. What was the process like dealing with a paid lawyer and now seeing what you do on your own?
Well, I had a paid lawyer. I was supposed to have one of the best lawyers where I was from. I never knew at that time what a good lawyer was. I just didn't know.
Okay.
But, as I started to do the law and work with other people and work with other lawyers on cases for other people in federal prison, you start to see, man, that a lot of these lawyers are lazy to a certain extent, I think. Not all, because there's some good lawyers out there. I mean, the lawyers that I ended up having represent me now, John Gleason, former federal judge, That's when I found out what a real lawyer was. When I went back to court on this appeal that I had in, I found out what a real lawyer was because they came down there with a team from Brooklyn. I had 4 lawyers down there. They were prepared. They had binders. They had everything in, the case law in one binder. They had all my certificates in another binder. They had all my rehabilitation in another binder. They were prepared. So there was a big difference between the lawyers that I dealt with in upstate New York and Rochester, New York, and these lawyers that came down from Brooklyn. I mean, there's good lawyers out there, people like Sean Hopwood, Brandon Sample. I mean, these guys are like lawyers that are super prepared. They're going in there to fight for their clients compared to the lawyer that I had. I felt like he put me in a bad position, man.
And speaking on that, I was reading some of your the article you had about how you had a plea deal and the lawyer didn't tell a prosecutor and you was in open court trying to tell a judge. How does that work between a defendant and his lawyer with a plea deal? Doesn't the lawyer do what the defendant says? How does that work?
Well, according to the law, the lawyer is supposed to do exactly what he's supposed to advise me, but the ultimate decision is up to me. And when I informed my lawyer, I said, hey, look, I'll take this plea, but I'd like to get the 2 points off for the gun. If the government won't budge, then I'll plead. Well, he didn't do that. And I knew that this was going to be the last opportunity for me to be with my lawyer in court on this certain date. So I addressed the judge and I told the judge what happened in the case. And the judge, he shut me down, man. He didn't want me to talk. But at that point, I knew the law and I knew that my lawyer was ineffective during the plea negotiation process. 100% I knew he was ineffective. But I knew if I didn't put it on the record, I'd never win. I ended up filing a pro se motion to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and I made that argument, and I actually won and went back on a hearing. But on the hearing, the judge at that time said, well, you know what? Even if your lawyer didn't do what you told him to do, I don't think you would have taken the plea anyway. And I kind of got, well, it's crazy, right? But this is how the law works. You have to prove, one, that your lawyer was ineffective, that he provided deficient performance. And the second prong, you have to prove that you're prejudiced. So even if I could prove that my lawyer was ineffective, that he was deficient, I had to prove that I was prejudiced. And the way around that for the court is to say, well, you know what? I don't think you would have taken the plea agreement anyway. But the record speaks for itself, The truth was there, but I still was denied. But I'm thankful that, years later that my judge had compassion, and he used the First Step Act to release me. So I'm grateful for my judge, man. I'm grateful for what he did. And I have an enormous amount of respect for him for what he's done later on by giving me a second chance to reclaim my life.
Definitely. That's definitely good to hear. A judge gave somebody a second chance. So you entering Big Sandy. What was it like entering Big Sandy back in that time? And what was your experience like there?
Entering Big Sandy was a dangerous place. Back then, that was the most dangerous prison in the United States. Worse than state prisons. It was dangerous, man.
Where is that located at? For people who don't know.
Inez, Kentucky.
Okay.
United States Penitentiary, Big Sandy. It was the most dangerous prison in the federal prison system at the time, hands down. People were murdered in there. Staff members were. My cellmate actually stabbed one of the correctional officers there over a gallon of wine. It was a dangerous place, man. And you put my book out on the flyer, and that whole book is all about USP Big Sandy. It'll be out in a couple weeks. The editor's still working on it. It should have been done by now, but that book will be out soon, and people can see what was really going on there.
How much time did you spend in Big Sandy? How much time did you spend there?
I was in Big Sandy for about 2.5 years. And it was a blessing to leave there. I went to USP Lee after that, another maximum security prison, federal prison.
Another question I'll ask you. Since you started working in the law library, and a lot of prisons are separated through gangs, through color, through neighborhoods. How it is like for you in there? Because I see a lot of your pictures, you're mentoring a lot of black dudes. Was there resistance on the black side, resistance on the white side, or the gangs? Like, how was that for you being intermingling with everybody?
Well, look, man, it's a little different, man, in there, right? From what people think. A lot of it's racially segregated, man. A lot of it, right? But I'm from New York, and I grew up in the inner city. I was able to intermingle with everybody. You know what I'm saying? So it was a lot easier for me than it would be for a regular white dude from somewhere else. Not everybody accepts you on the white side or the black side. I had some issues, man. I had some issues in Big Sandy where the white federal prisoners didn't like the fact that I hung out with some of the blacks and Hispanics from New York. And they ended up jumping me over there, man. I ended up getting in a physical confrontation over there, man. And it turned into kind of a big thing after I left, where the New York dude stepped up for me while I was in the shoe, tried to get me out of the hole, but they didn't want to let me out of the hole. And the dude that I ended up in it with, it was like 4 or 5 dudes jumped me. A year later, he got shot and killed. He was stabbing someone outside on the yard. So they shot him and killed him from the tower. But I'm going to tell you something. Leaving Big Sandy, man, was a blessing to leave there. And, you know, some people were faking in there, man. Talking about, you know, I was in Big Sandy, and, man, it was a blessing to leave that prison, man. The police had no control.
You said it was like a super max, a maximum?
It's a maximum security prison, man, but extremely violent.
And in your time in there, you said the SHU, that's the box, what he would call the box.
Yeah, it's the box, special housing unit. In New York, we call it the box. In federal prison, they call it the SHU.
So how much time do you spend in the box? I know a lot of people advocating for it, saying how cruel it is, how inhumane it is. How was it, your experience in the box?
At one point, I spent 9 months in the hole, man, in the box. And for real, it didn't bother me for a while, but after about 5 months, things started bothering me. And I think, you know, personally, man, I feel like I ended up with PTSD from being in there so long. I started thinking the police were putting stuff in my food. I wouldn't eat the food. I was just drinking water, eat the fruit, bread, stuff that I didn't think they could do stuff to. Because they're nasty, man. Some of the people in there do bad things, man. Some of the cops, you know what I'm saying? They just hate prisoners, man. So with that, and then being in the SHU so long, it started to mess with me a little bit mentally, man. That was in 2000. I want to say it was in 2009.
In which prison did you begin law, starting cases? In which prison did you begin that?
Well, really, I started at Big Sandy because it was a way for me to get out of my unit, man, and get away from all the things that were going on. And I knew right away I had to get on my appeal. So when I got to Big Sandy, they had a pretty good law library down there. Everything was electronic through the computers. And I started working on my case in Big Sandy. And then when I went to USP Lee, I really stepped it up. And that's how I ended up winning that first appeal. I did all my own stuff. I wrote some stuff in pretrial that my lawyer, Jill Harrington, she was my lawyer after that first lawyer, out of New York too. She's out of New York. And I had just provided everything to her. She put everything together, put it in legal terms, and we ended up winning that first appeal with Jill Harrington. So I was grateful for that. But once we got to court, the judge wasn't trying to hear it, you know. But years later, it worked out in my favor. So, like I said, I'm grateful for the judge, man. But that's why I started doing law.
Excuse me, pardon me. Did you have a background in law, like college, like for you to go in and be able to do it so well? Where did that come from?
Nah, man, I'm from, like I told you, I'm from the inner city, man. I grew up with, my father was a drug addict. My mother was a single mother. I just think it was a blessing, man, where I could always write. I was always a good writer. But I could always comprehend well. And I knew that my life depended on it. If I was ever getting out of prison, I knew it was going to be because of me, because of the work that I put in. I couldn't count on, after what I went through with the first lawyer, and I paid a lot of money for that lawyer. After I went through what I went through with him, I didn't trust no lawyers. And I knew, man, if I didn't put the work in, it was over with, man. I was going to spend the next 40 years of my life in prison. I get out at 60 years old, and I knew that wasn't no life. So I had to push myself, man.
Definitely. Now, I want to ask you 2 questions. I want to ask you about the 924C, because a lot of people don't know about that. Like, I'm just knowing about it by speaking through you or seeing stuff you post. And also, I want to also speak about the post you put on how Trump and the First Step Act was influential on helping you get out.
All right. So, I want to talk about that. You know, a lot of times what the government does is they're stacked 924Cs. What they'll do is they'll let you sell drugs, right? And what they'll do is they'll bust a house. Like in New York, we got gate houses back then. So what they did in my case was they busted a house, but they didn't arrest us. But they found a gun in there. They found a 12-gauge shotgun. Now, that was 5 years, so they left us out there. Now they waited a week later, and, we made some bad choices. We got another house we were selling drugs out of, and we had a 22 rifle in that house. And they busted that house. Now, when they busted that house, that's when they put the case together. But that's because that second gun, that 22 rifle, came with 25 years. So 18 U.S.C. 924C is possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime. You might think it's only a pistol, or some of your listeners, but it could be a shotgun. It could be a 22 rifle. So now I had 5 years, 25 years, and then 10 for the drugs, and they all had to be stacked. So what President Trump and Congress did with the First Step Act was this. They said for the last 30 years, courts have been misapplying the law. That's not what we intended. We intended the second 25 years to be for those who went to federal prison for a gun, didn't learn their lesson, got out and got a gun a second time. So what Congress did was said, now we're going to only make it 5 years, 5 for each additional gun count. But what we're not going to do is make it retroactive. So we're going to leave people, all the people that have been in prison, like myself, we were left suffering, right? Because there was no way for us to get out because it wasn't retroactive. I don't understand how you can say that this charge is wrong. We've been misapplying it for 30 years, but it doesn't apply to the people that have been suffering.
Definitely.
So then what I did in my case was I argued under the compassionate release statute, the First Step Act allowed judges to determine extraordinary and compelling reasons to reduce a sentence. And my argument was, hey, Congress changed the law or clarified it, because that's what they titled it. They clarified the law that the second 25 years is wrong, that I wouldn't have it if I was arrested today in my rehabilitation since I had been in prison. I earned a college degree. I completed over 100 programs. I worked as a suicide companion. I facilitated alternative violence project seminars. And the judge agreed with that. He said, I believe these are extraordinary and compelling reasons. And what he did was he ordered my release. I was supposed to be released on, I believe it was on June 5th. My family had drove up to Kentucky to pick me up. I seen him in the parking lot. I actually walked out of the prison, and I was 2 minutes away from walking out of the gate. And the officer got a call on his walkie-talkie. And it said, stop Chad Marks, stop him right now. And they turned me around and put me back in prison because the government appealed the case that at the last hour that morning. So the Second Circuit Court of Appeals held me in jail for 3 weeks until another panel could hear the case. They heard the case to a certain extent, a limited extent, and released me. The government's now appealing that decision and trying to put me back in prison under Stat 924Cs. But because you asked that question, I'd like to go a little further so people know what's really going on. You have another guy named Keepa Mau Mau. He's in Utah. He went to prison with over 100 years, I believe, as a 20-year-old young man. His judge did the same thing that my judge did. And his judge said, look, I think that he's rehabilitated. I think there's extraordinary, compelling reasons here. He was a very young man when he made these irrational, irresponsible choices. And I'm going to reduce his sentence to time served, and I'm going to let him out. But that didn't happen. The government appealed his case too, and they kept him in prison. So, I mean, you can say, hey, look, Chad Marks is white. Keepa Mau Mau is not. He's not a white person. I don't know exactly. I think they're Polynesian, right? But I think when we talk about, I mean, it's being done to numerous African Americans across the country too.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
Let's not, we ain't gonna cut no cars, man. We're gonna keep it 100, right?
Definitely.
So what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, if you want to talk about discrimination, I want to pick the right word when I say this, right? Systemic racism. I mean, that's an example. To me, it is.
Yeah.
Because we got another white guy that was just released. He had 213 years, and he's my friend, and he deserved to get out 100%. And it was in Philly, but they're not appealing his case.
Oh, wow.
But they're appealing Mau Mau's case, and they're appealing, numerous African Americans that are sitting in prison. And it's not a race thing, man. It's our framers said equal justice under the law. Well, if we're dealing with equal justice under the law, why are they appealing this case in Utah, but they're not appealing the case in Philly?
Exactly.
I mean, equal justice under the law. And the government, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal courts across the nation have said, look, Congress, President Trump, they said, look, this law is wrong. Well, if it's wrong for everybody. It's not wrong just for, the people that are coming in now. How many fathers have left their children without a father because they're in prison under Stat 924C sentences? They went in at 20, they're going to come home at 60. How do you succeed? I think those are the things that, Congress should be thinking about. How do you succeed when you go to prison at 24 and come home at 60? I mean,
that's a different ballgame, because right now my dad, he's locked up and he's doing 27 years. He's on 27 years in, and he's going through a similar thing right now. They changed the laws down in Virginia, but they didn't do it retroactive. So he's under the old law, but they didn't change it. So pretty much it was doing 65% of your time was the law before. Then they made it 85, but they brought it back to 65, but they didn't bring it back to 65. But if people who've been locked up, because if they do, he'll be released right now. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's outrageous, man.
And we
live in a country where, freedom is the foundation, right? And justice is supposed to be blind. I mean, is it only blind when you're hammering people, or is it blind when you're supposed to let people out? I mean, what are we dealing with right here?
Another question I ask you: what do you feel about the 13th Amendment that's still says you can be a slave only if you're imprisoned, and with the labor is so cheap, and other companies and businesses reaping benefits of jobs that cost $50,000, $60,000, in which prisoners, if they was getting that paid, they could take care of their families at home, and it'll cut out jail violence because you won't have to sell drugs if you making decent money off this labor you're doing.
Well, I think that they should definitely do something about that, right? The 13th Amendment should be amended. I don't know how you want to amend it, but it should be amended. You got guys in there working, you got guys in there working in the unicorn factory, and they think, well, they're making good money for prison because they're making $200 a month and they can buy commissary, potato chips, and soda. But man, it's ridiculous. And the way that they talk to people is ridiculous. I was in a unit, a guy cleaned the bathrooms. He cleaned 6 bathrooms, showers, toilets, everything, and he made $8 a month. When you're making $8 a month, who really wants to clean the bathroom? Which during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's super important to have the bathroom cleaned numerous times a day. But who wants to do that for $8? No, I mean, prison is modern day slavery. I've been there. I spent 17 and a half years in there. It's just a legal way to put people in there and do some slavery stuff, man. It's wrong, 100% wrong. And that needs to be fixed. That's something that should be at the top of the subject.
Definitely.
You got the firefighters in the state prison in California out there risking their lives. Where they're making $1 an hour.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Fighting the wildfires out there. Yeah, prisoners fighting wildfires for $1 an hour, something like that.
Outrageous, man. Outrageous.
So being in turn to a jailhouse lawyer, what were some of the cases you worked on, and what were some of the difficulties you faced working on cases not yours?
Well, there's always difficulties in federal prison when you do law work with the police and the administration. I've had them threaten to put me in the hole before, but it didn't bother me. I said, I got a 40-year sentence. There's nothing that you can do to me to hurt my feelings or do anything to hurt me. The only thing that would hurt me, like I said, is lose my mother, right? You already did everything you can do to me. You gave me a 40-year sentence. So I had a lot of pushback from staff. And there's been times where staff would come to me and say, look, we're not going to mess with you as long as you don't write up our staff. But if their staff was doing something wrong, I mean, not minor stuff, but if you were beating up prisoners or putting knives in people's cells and getting them new charges, I was pushing back. I was doing everything I can to make sure those things didn't happen. So, I mean, that was the pushback that I got. I mean, I worked on some big cases, like I said. The one case that I'm real happy about is Ronnie Lauderdale. He had a life sentence, African-American grandfather in his 60s. He was in bad health. He had caught COVID-19 in Lexington, Kentucky. When he came to me, he asked me, he said, hey, man, I need help. And I looked at his case and I said, look, man, I don't really think this is going to happen, but, we'll try because you got life. I wanted to help him. Well, like I said, man, I got released, and the next day I think it was 2 days later, he ended up getting released. He had a lawyer step in after I filed all the initial motions, and then I worked with her on the COVID-19 stuff because he was yelling to me through the window, telling me, man, I got COVID-19, I'm gonna die. Please call my family. He was yelling from another unit, and I was writing his lawyer, and I was writing and saying, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what the law says. This is what the court can do under the COVID-19. She ended up submitting everything, and he walked out of prison. Wow. So that's a big case for me, man. I was with Guy Fisher also in Raybrook, and you obviously know who Guy Fisher is.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, this is a man that went to prison without a GED. Today he has a doctorate degree. He's been in prison over 35 years.
Wow, it's been that long?
I believe it's been 30. I want to say 34, 35 years. He, I mean, if he's not a textbook example of rehabilitation, what is? I mean, 18 U.S.C. 3553A says that federal courts must impose a punishment that is sufficient but not greater than necessary to achieve the goals of sentencing. He's rehabilitated. He's a different person. And he doesn't probably have, I mean, he's not in the best of health. Let's say that, right? He deserves a second chance to reclaim his freedom and be with his children and his family and his loved ones. And, I'm advocating for him, man, all day, every day.
So with Guy Fisher, what is the issues with the parole board? Was the hearings getting denied?
He doesn't even have parole. He's in federal prison. He's got a life sentence in federal prison. Life is life. There is no
natural life.
The only person that let him out is President Trump. And I'm advocating for him, man. Going hard, man. The man deserves to get out of prison, man.
Wow. So now with you being out, what are your plans now as far as doing your legal work? Are you planning to do legal work as a lawyer? Like what's your plans now that you've been home?
No, I'm not planning to be a lawyer, man. I work at Freedom Fighters. It's a paralegal and prison consultant firm. And I do work every day. I got 2 files right here I'm working on. So I'm trying to help people get out of prison, man. I've been doing a lot of clemency petitions, a lot of research, some writing for other lawyers. Some lawyers have actually hired me to write some stuff for them. So, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm putting a business together called Felcon, where I'm going to be the biggest prison service provider to state and federal prisoners, man. Getting ready to get that launched here soon. So that's kind of what my focus is. I've been doing this for 17 years. I'm not gonna come home and stop now. This is what I do. This is what I enjoy doing. So,
what was it like getting out that door, just going straight, your first foot out the door? What was that like? The first toe out the door?
Well, because of what happened to me when they walked me to the gate and turned me back around.
Yeah.
I was a little nervous. Inside, I wanted to run. In my mind, I thought I was going to run.
Get me out of here.
Yeah. But I just walked. I got a video of it, man. I walked real fast, and I was just like, it didn't seem real, man, but it felt good to see the grass, man, without a fence in between me or a concrete wall. And my first thoughts, obviously, was to get something to eat, like some real food. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was that. My mind was just like, I don't know, man. I don't think I believed it at first, man. Ain't that crazy to say?
Surreal, right? Surreal.
I knew it was happening. I felt like my feet weren't, like, my mind was telling me to move, but it felt like I wasn't moving, but I was, and I was moving fast. I was just trying to get off that compound. I didn't want to get that call, once I got in the car and they tried to pull us over. So I just wanted to get out of there.
Let's go far as possible.
Yeah, I want to get away from Kentucky as soon as possible, man.
So being out, what was things like going in 17 years and coming back out 17 years, but everything has changed? How was that for you, adjusting to everything?
Well, I came out during this COVID-19 pandemic. All the riots were going on. Coming out, man, I wasn't real shocked. The phone was difficult for me. It's a computer with a phone in it. That's how I refer to it. I was scared to be around people at first. I'm still a little nervous around people, like going in a restaurant or large crowds or going to buy. I try to, like, if I go out to eat or something, I try to sit in the corner away from people. But I think, it's a transition, man. I'm just scared of people. And sometimes it's like I'm nervous to cross, like, the street walks too. When the cars are coming by, like, I'm nervous. I'm looking around. Those are only 2 things that were, and sleeping. Sleeping at night was real difficult for me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've been locked. I'm going to tell you why, because I've been locked in that cell all them years, right? I was actually locked in cells almost my whole bit.
Okay, no dorms.
No dorms. So even when I ended up going to this low for the last year, I would put my own lock on my door. So being out here going to sleep, anything that I hear, I'm up. I think I hear stuff, and not that I'm crazy or nothing. It's just that
used the environment you came from.
Yeah, and being in the environment that I was in, it's dangerous to sleep and not have your door locked or something. You know what I mean? Anything can happen in there. So yeah, sleeping was the most difficult for real. I still have trouble with sleeping at night sometimes.
Definitely. So re-entering and having a new program, do you feel like there is need for like mental health services for people who re-enter? Because I have a lot of friends who come from jail and I talk to them, and one thing they always say is like, yo, I needed this talk. Like, they never get to talk about what they've been through. They just feel like, I got a hold in, I'm tough, yeah, I did it, and not speak about things that they went through, because as a man, some things is crazy to you,
Yeah. I think that they should, man, provide some type of counseling for people that do a lot of time, right? I think it should be part of a reentry plan. I got a whole thing that I think they should do in prison, but I think that walking out, it should be part of the reentry plan, because you do need someone to talk to, where you don't have to come out with the tough guy persona. In those places, man, you got to be a tough guy, man. You can be a gentleman, but the places I've been in maximum security prisons, in federal prison. And I've been in the state. I've been in Attica. I've been in Comstock. But let me tell you something, Attica and Comstock, some people might not believe this. They couldn't hold a match to Big Sandy or Victorville, some of the federal penitentiaries I've been in.
Wow.
USP Pollock. I mean, those places are dangerous places. So you don't have people that you can really talk to, and say, hey, look, man, this is how I really feel. Instead, you got to, the image you project is the image you have to protect. In prison, and especially in federal prison, maximum security federal prisons, It's dangerous, man. I mean, I'm just giving it to you real. It's dangerous. When I first walked in, I talk about this in my book. The captain told me when I got there, they do an interview. He said, look, man, you seem like you're semi-intelligent. Don't get any tattoos on your face and make sure you got a knife. And I was perplexed when he said that. I was bewildered to believe that a federal prison captain would tell me to get a knife.
Exactly,
this
right?
man just told me to get a knife. I was shocked, man. And when you go to Big Sandy, any other prison, you get brand new clothes. But there you don't. They tell you if you're still here in 30 days, you can come back to the state shop, back to the laundry, and we'll give you brand new khakis. But most people don't make it here more than 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was shocking.
So is it a cellie in there, or is one man cell in Big Sandy?
Big Sandy, there was 2 men in a cell.
And what's that like, living in a cell with 2 people in small quarters? Because a lot of people, we just see it on TV and stuff like that. What's the reality?
I mean, sometimes it depends, man. It depends on who you're in a cell with. For me, right? Sometimes you're in a cell with people that you don't want to be with, and they agitate you, and problems happen. Someone in my unit in Big Sandy stabbed his cellie in the head with a 9-inch shank and killed him. Stabbed him right in the head. I've been fortunate to have some pretty good cellies over the years. So it depends on who you live with, man. You got to work with people, man. And I had a few bad cellies too, and just had them moved them out. You got to find a new place to live. I mean, that's how it works. But no, it's not easy to live in a room the size of most people's bathroom, or even smaller. And then, when you're locked down a lot in there, you got to eat your food in there right next to the toilet. The beds kill your back. It's not what people think, man. It's not a great place. They give you cable television and they tell you that they got all these programs and we can play basketball and do all these other things, but the basketball court's all messed up. The basketballs ain't got air in them. And this is what your tax dollars are paying for. They're not telling the public the truth, man.
And then we'll speak about the trial penalty. When people get sentenced after trial, it's always 20 more or huge more years than what they get a plea deal. So it seems like if they can give you a plea deal 5 years, why can't you get sentenced to 5 years if you lose? So that's pretty much like you said, like a trial penalty. If you go to trial, they give you more time than if they're gonna give you a 5-year plea, which they feel like your crime is worth 5 years. But if I go here, I get 20. But how? Like how?
I mean, I was in that position. I had a plea that could have been as low as 10 years, but because I exercised my constitutional right to trial, I got 40. So you would leave. People would think, well, if the government felt that 10 years was sufficient, but not greater than necessary to achieve the goals of sentencing with a 10-year sentence, how is 40 years ever okay? It's not. You're getting a penalty for exercising something that the framers guaranteed you when they started this country, right? When they put the Constitution together, right? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And like I said now, the government said that 10 years was good. I ended up going to trial. I got 40 years. I served 17 years, 5 months, and 21 days in prison. I mean, you can say that I'm rehabilitated because I am. I appreciate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I respect the rule of law. If dudes want to get in my car, I want to pat them down. I ain't trying to go back to prison. You can't get in my car if I ain't patting you down. So if we're in that position, right, and it's supposed to be equal justice, and we talked about that earlier, man, how are you appealing my case and trying to send me back to prison at the taxpayer's cost? There's no reason to put me back in prison. I'm no longer a threat to public safety. I did 7.5 more years than what they felt originally was sufficient. It's outrageous, man. But it's not just about me. It's not the Chad Marks story for real. It's all the men and women in prison that deserve the same chance that I got. You might have seen Alice Johnson last night speak at the National Republican National Convention. And she talked about it. She said there's thousands more of Alice Johnsons. There's 1,000. There's people in there right now, man. Like I'm working on Rodney Love's case. He deserves to get out of prison more than me. He got life plus 55 when he was 20 years old for a nonviolent drug offense.
Wow.
I wrote his judge. I said, look, I feel bad. He deserved to get out of prison more than I deserve to get out of prison. So, man, this ain't the Chad Marks story, man. This is the Rodney Love story. This is the James Roman story, the Chris Hunter story, the Keep a Mau story. It's their story, man. And like what Alice Johnson said last night, I mean, some people might not like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. Because when you're right, you're right. When you're wrong, you're wrong. President Trump, they put that First Step Act together, right? And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be out here talking to you right now.
Definitely,
if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to get Rodney Love out of prison. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to get the brother Reggie Owens out, who had 35 years for stacked 924C charges. So, I mean, I'm grateful. There's a whole lot more that needs to be done. We need to take that first step back and make sure that's what it was, the first step. And let's start getting the second step and make those sentencing reforms retroactive. The senator out of Utah, Mike Lee, big guy on 924C stacking. Let's get down there and make it happen. Because if it's wrong, it's wrong. And President Trump can do it. He pushed Mitch McConnell in the last days to get it passed.
Oh, yeah.
Man, we live in a nation that's based on freedom, right? I mean, that's what we say. But if the law is wrong, man, it's got to apply to everybody, man.
Definitely.
Everybody.
Next question I want to ask you: being that your case was you got resentenced, and when dudes get their case resentenced, are there any penalties for the prosecutors and lawyers after the case? Like, say they know it was wrong, and you come out proving that it was wrong. Is there any charges or anything for them?
Well, in the feds, man, no, because the prosecutor has qualified immunity, right? I mean, they can do whatever they want. I mean, they might get. I mean, in my situation, no, nothing would ever happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, they got immunity, and that's something that's been in the news lately, like on social media. There should be some accountability, let's say.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you can't. I mean, you see it all the time with them death penalty cases down there with Ryan Stevens, right? With that movie Mercy Me.
Yeah.
How many people they put on death row and nothing happens to the prosecutors, man? You put people innocent, and unfortunately, man, a lot of times it's African American brothers down there on death row for crimes they didn't commit.
Yeah.
People sat in prison for 30 years thinking they were going to die for something they didn't do. I can't even imagine what that feels like. I did what I did. I deserved to go to prison. I didn't deserve 40 years, but I deserved to go to prison. But how about them brothers that sat on death row 30, 35 years that didn't deserve it? Or the people that the state, they murdered, man. They killed innocent people, man. They did what they say they're against. So, I mean, there should be repercussions, man. There should be some accountability so we can stop this stuff, man. This stuff's nonsense, man. It's nonsense. You don't have to send young 20-year-olds, 24-year-olds, men or women to prison for the rest of their lives for nonviolent drug offenses.
Yeah,
I think there should be a system. Sense. I think there should be a system in place where you say, okay, you give a guy 20 years, you tell him, you know what? We got a prison right here for you, right? We got a 6-year program. The first 2 years you're going to get educated. We're going to get your GED. We're going to teach you character education. The next 2 years, we're going to get you some college. We're going to get you an associate's degree. Exactly. And the next 2 years, we're going to get you a trade so we can send you out in 6 years. Now, this is your second chance. You got a 20-year sentence, but this is your second chance. 6 years to a lot of people, it's a lot of time, right? Yeah. Even 6 years is a lot of time. But when you do something like that and you say, look, we got this prison for you and we're going to educate you and get you out there and we're going to do everything we can to help you, you go out there and you're successful. But if you want to come to prison, and some people might not like what I say, but if you want to come to prison and you want to sell drugs in prison, you want to stab people, well, you can do your 20-year sentence at places like Big Sandy. But we don't want to send you to Big Sandy. We want to send you to this other prison and have you do the right thing. We want you to walk out of prison and be a real father, a real man, a real leader.
Exactly.
I mean, look at all these kids in Chicago. Look at New York. We're from New York. Look at my city.
It's getting worse. Very bad. Very, very bad nowadays.
These kids got no father, man. They got no father figure.
At all. And they just looking up to each other and they all lost.
100%. I see it every day right here in my own city, man. I mean, I could walk in there and talk to, I'm from there. I'm from the inner city. I'm not from the suburbs. I'm a white dude, had a crack case. You know, most of my team was all black. So, but I changed my life. I'm a different person, man. But I know what them brothers are going through, man. We got to get kids like my Cedric Dean. He's got a SAVE organization in North Carolina. He said we got to get kids job ready instead of jail ready, man.
Exactly. Definitely.
We're failing, man.
So before we go, I want you to speak on your book. Blood and Razor Wire. The cover is very, you know what I mean, showing with the razor wire and everything, the blood. So can you talk about that a little bit with the people before we go?
For sure. The editor has the book right now. It's supposed to be done within the next 2 weeks. It should have been done by now. But Blood on the Razor Wire, man, is it's a true story, man. It's a story that I can tell that most people can't because I was in a maximum security federal prison for a long time, different ones. So the book is mainly about Big Sandy, man. And there ain't no cut cards in the book, man. It's real. It is what it is. It's not a story of redemption. I mean, the epilogue tells my story that, yeah, I changed my life at the end, but it's a story to let people know what's real, man. People see these shows on TV like 60 Days In and you know, this stuff's nonsense. You want to know what prison really is, what federal prison is in the United States? Well, that's the book, Blood on the Razor Wire. I lived that life, man. And it talks about just everything, racial segregation in there, the violence, the things that the police do to prisoners, mental health, like you asked about mental health prisoners.
Yeah.
I watched them people 4-point people, man, and handcuff people to the beds by their arms and their legs and listen to them scream for hours, man.
Damn.
Hours.
Just leave them
this
there.
This is the stuff that you don't see that's really going on. You might see some of this stuff on like Locked Up and Gangland, but this takes you inside Big Sandy, man. One of the most dangerous prisons in the United States, hands down.
And it's crazy because you say you've been there 2 years, and that sounds like a damn movie right there, just in 2 years.
Man, my first day there was 4 guys on the yard beating another guy with a lock. The police shot the guy that was getting beat with the lock. They shot him on accident. That was my first day. That was my first day there.
Yeah, so you already knew once you said, okay, all right, we're in full ride.
Man, honestly, I didn't think I'd ever make it out, man. I figured I'd probably die in prison, man.
So what was the day like in Big Sandy? What was the day like in there? Just the yard, the mess hall?
Man, every day was on edge. You woke up in the morning, you went to breakfast, you came back, you went to your program. You never slept unless the door was locked. You couldn't take a nap. I mean, they got cars in there. You know, people call them cars. Like if you're from New York and you're white, you're in the white New York car. If you're black, you're in the black New York car. They got gang cars. They got all that stuff. But in that prison, you were not allowed to take a nap. You couldn't go to the shower by yourself. You had to have a partner come with you. You got to wear your shoes to the shower. When I was there, they had a white mop bucket, a white broom, a black mop bucket, a Mexican broom, Mexican mop bucket. If you were black, you couldn't use their mop bucket, a Mexican mop bucket.
Deep?
It was that serious, man. It was dangerous, man. They had a race ride in my unit. The police came in and shot the beanbag guns, and it got out of hand. I mean, it's dangerous, man. But you know, it really, man, it's nonsense, man.
Yeah.
When we should be sticking together, man, to achieve a bigger goal, man. And
yeah, all these CEOs and all the guards. That's the pressure right there.
Or just changing the system, man. Nelson Mandela, man.
Yeah,
change
definitely.
the system, man. Work together to change the system. Because together we can conquer as one will fail, right? But if we're all fighting each other, what happens? We continue to have mandatory minimums. We continue to see brothers get beat by the police and put in shoe cells for years at a time. Man, it's nonsense, man. When we can all come together and make change. Not that we have to do it with violence. We don't have to do it with violence, man. We can do it with our voices, man. Definitely. We see all these people we saw these, and for real, man, we see all the women in the street, right? The women out there marching like what happened with Freddie Gray down there in Baltimore. Happened? It was the women on the front lines, man. It was the mothers, man. The sisters, the grandmothers. They were on the front line. They were the ones out there fighting. Why can't we march on D.C.? Why can't we have another million-man march? Why can't we do that stuff? Do it peacefully, man. We don't have to be beating each other up, man. We elect you. And if you're not listening to us, then let's put some people in places that do listen. Let's put Sean Hopwood up there. Let's put people like Cedric Dean from the SAVE organization, Safeguard, Atone, Validate, Educate, North Carolina. Because these are the people that are going to make things happen. They understand. They understand our pain, man. It's wrong. And we can fix it. I mean, that's what the government's supposed to be, right? For the people, by the people.
Exactly.
And if they don't want to listen, I mean, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, everybody's happy, but we can't forget the 1994 crime bill.
So what's your thoughts on that? Because you've been in prison for a while. So what's your thoughts on Kamala Harris now running for vice president, trying to be for black people per se?
All right, we're keeping it real, right? I don't like to really get too political because I don't want people to get upset, man. But like I said, I don't want to say, hey, I'm a Trump supporter, I'm a Biden, Kamala Harris supporter. I want to say this. I'm a supporter of whoever is with fixing what's wrong. Exactly. And I go based on facts, man. I don't just go based on, hey, what people say, because they've been telling us stuff for years, man. Trump did make the first step back, right? He got that passed. Yeah. We know what Joe Biden did with the 1994 crime bill. We know what Kamala Harris did in California as a U.S. attorney. Exactly. We know that people went to death row. We know that she withheld some evidence on some cases. And I'm not saying that's, hey, maybe it's their time to fix this thing, right? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But what we don't want is we don't want false promises. We don't want people that don't understand what's really going on with the criminal justice system to say, well, we got to legalize, marijuana for 2 ounces or less. That's not fixing the problem, man. That ain't our problem. Our problem isn't marijuana offenses with 2 ounces or less. Our problem is we're sending people like Ronnie Lauderdale to federal prison for life for a nonviolent drug offense, man. That's our problem. We need to fix that. We're keeping people like Keepa Mau Mau in federal prison when he's rehabilitated at the price of taxpayers. So if President Trump can go in there and fix that, let's go. Let's fix it. If it's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, don't just no lip service. This is what we want. You want our vote? This is what we want. Because my people are voting. There's how many people we got in prison? 2.1 million people.
That's a lot of people.
Their people are voting, man. They got mothers, man. Them African Americans that are sitting in prison, those Hispanics, those poor whites, we got mothers, man. We got fathers, man. We got brothers. We got cousins. They're voting. So don't give us no lip service. Let's go down there and take care of business. Let's make that your top 3 priority. Let's start with something small. Let's make the First Step Act, the stuff that Congress said was wrong. Let's take that and let's make that retroactive. Cory Booker, during a Democratic debate, he got on the stage, brother, and he said, listen, I'm challenging everybody today, if you're elected president, to grant clemency to these people that should have got out under the First Step Act, but we didn't make it retroactive. Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a good way to start.
Kamala Harris knows the system. She was a U.S. attorney. Let's start there. Let's do something right. Let's send these brothers home and these women, these fathers and these mothers home that deserve a second chance to reclaim their lives. Let's start there. But on the flip side now, when people get that second chance, right, they can't go out there and mess that up.
Because what they do make it bad for everybody else.
That's right. Let's go out there and let's appreciate freedom, man. Hey, man, I will never, ever give my freedom up, man, ever again. There's nothing in the world worth losing my freedom, man.
Definitely no way was behind that wall. It's easy to get in trouble and hard as hell to get out, as they say.
100%, man. 100%.
So what would you say to people who say you're like the angel, you know what I'm saying? Like Jinx said, it was like God sent, you know what I mean? How do you feel knowing that what you're doing is really touching the lives? Because like you said, it's bigger than you. So it's like something was put in you for you to do work, not just for yourself, but for the people.
Well, listen, man, I used to tell people this in prison all the time, right? And I changed my life. Like I said, man, I'm a believer in God, in Christ, man. So when he says I'm an angel, I used to tell him, I say, hey, look, man, I'm just a tool that God uses, right? God uses me as a tool to help other people. I like helping people, man. I like seeing when Alice Johnson got out of prison and ran across the street to hug her family. I like doing that stuff, man, because I know how it felt for me, for my mother. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
If I could help people reunite with their mothers, their fathers, hey, man, it's a gift from God, man. And I like doing what I do because I despise what they do on the other side to us. Like I said, man, I deserve to go to prison. People, there has to be consequences, right? We know that, right? There has to be consequences, or else we live in a lawless nation, man, and it'd be dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So we have to have some laws in place, man. But the time should fit the crime. People should be able to get out of prison when they're rehabilitated, man, when they change their lives. And for me, my rehabilitation wasn't through classes, man, or my college degree. It was through the fact that I learned to appreciate my freedom. I might not have done that in 2 years or 3 years. I'm just keeping it 100 with you. It took some time for me to say, hey, I appreciate what's on the other side of this fence, what's on the other side of this wall, man. So when they say I'm an angel and all that, man, I just say, man, God gave me a gift, man, to help people, and I enjoy doing what I'm doing. Jinx, man, listen, you know his story, man. Came rough upbringing. Russell Simmons took him in. Man, he was still caught in the streets, but man ain't deserved no 25 years.
Yeah,
and in his case, because we talked a little bit about ineffective assistance, he got the same exact sentence he would have got had he went to trial and lost. Who's going to plead guilty to that? You'd be surprised how many cases I've done. I got a case right now I'm working on. The man copped out to life. Who pleads guilty to life? That's because the lawyer didn't tell him that, hey, you got 2 priors. The government placed an 851 notice on you, and now you're a mandatory life sentence, regardless if you go to trial or not.
Oh, so they didn't even know. So by the time you plead, it's too late. And by the time you sentence, you signed it already. It's like, now you're stuck trying to reverse it. Wow.
Man, I spent years doing a case, man, for a guy named Billy D. Williams out of North Carolina. He was 21 years old. He pled guilty in the backwoods of North Carolina, right? His lawyer didn't tell him that he was going to get life. It was automatic life. He got life, man. And I lost that case. And it affected me for a long, long time. But President Obama granted him clemency and reduced his life sentence to like 20-something years.
Oh, wow.
Which he should have just let him out. He shouldn't have reduced it to 20. Hey, listen, if you said the guy changed his life and he's redeemable, then let him out. But, man, it was good for me to see him. He actually, I think he got it. The same day I got denied, he got it. So it made me happy to see that that brother got out of prison, man, or that he had the opportunity to get out. He was 21 years old, man. He got copped out to a life sentence.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Are you still in contact with these brothers? Do you stay in contact with the brothers?
I haven't been in contact with Billy D. Williams because I left him years ago in Coleman in 2010. Okay. But I'm in contact with Ronnie Lauderdale, who I got out on a life sentence. I'm in contact with some of the people that I've helped. Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely.
How many prisons have you been in through the 17 years? How many do you think you've been in?
17 years. I want to say I was in Big Sandy, Pollock, Coleman, Florida, Raybrook, and Lexington. 5 prisons in 17 years.
Wow.
Dangerous places, man.
Dangerous what was COVID-19 like inside prison? Because my dad locked up. He said they put them on 23-hour lockdown since COVID-19. How was that?
Well, like I said, I ended up going to Lexington. I was in a single man cell, but there's no lock on that door. Like I said, I had to put my own lock on it that night. We were supposed to be confined to our cells, but there was 320 people in one unit and one officer, right? One guard. So people were doing whatever they wanted. They didn't take it serious because we didn't have it for like 3-4 weeks. And then we had like 300 cases in like 7 days and 7 people died. So that's when it got real, man. It got serious. But the administration, they didn't care, man. No one really cared. The only people that cared for real was us. And some of the guards cared. They didn't want to catch it either. But they used to line us up like cattle to pick up our trays 3 times a day. We're only a foot apart from each other. You could walk around, hang out with whoever you wanted for the guys that didn't take it serious. Some people wouldn't wear masks. I try to tell people, hey, man, I need you to put that mask on because it's not about you. It's about me. I'm wearing my mask to keep you safe. I'm asking you to wear yours to keep me safe. So there were some fights in there. They were only letting us use the phone for 30 minutes a week, 10-minute phone calls. Yeah, it was hectic, man. At first, they wouldn't let us use the email. So we're worried about us, but we're worried about our family. I'll tell you, I'm worried about my mother, man. She's in her 60s. Yeah, and she was in New York, and
contact out harder 30 minutes a week is nothing, really nothing.
Nothing, man. It was horrible, man. It's bad, man. I'm gonna tell you that it's bad.
So before we go, I'd like to ask you, since I told the Jinx Juvy about the For Life TV show that came out, since you have a book, do you see in the near future you turning your book into a movie, a film, or something? Since right now, like a film thing is going on, and you got a very interesting story.
Well, 100%, man. I definitely want to turn it into a movie, but it's a real movie. It ain't no fake movie. You know what I mean? And I think people should see it from that perspective, man. Definitely. See what's really going on here, and you can see. And I'm not just to promote myself or nothing like that, but people need to know what's really going on in them prisons, man.
Yeah, the inside story, because
I lived it, man.
Don't know.
You see a lot of books come out from guys that were in like low security prisons, FCIs. They didn't live the life that we lived in there, man. The life that we lived, you couldn't understand it unless you lived it, man. My book will give you some insight on it, but it's not, you got to live it, man, in order to understand what's really going on. Like when I tell you about the mop buckets, people are like, I told my mother.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm like, it's 2000s, like people's mop buckets, like wow, like it blew my mind. Like
I couldn't believe it either. I grabbed the wrong mop bucket when I first went in there to clean the cell.
Oh yeah.
So that's how I ended up finding out about the mop buckets.
Oh wow! So which buckets you grabbed? Which one you grabbed?
I grabbed the Sereno mop bucket, the Mexican mop bucket.
Oh, the Serenos. I heard it.
It was like, hey, homie, listen, no disrespect. I know you're new, but listen, homie, that's not your. This is how the mop buckets work. Your people got their mop bucket up there. And at first, I was mad, like, man, I'm about to mop the cell, man. And he was like, nah, it ain't like that, man. No disrespect to you, but your people got their own mop bucket. You got to go get it. The dude up there in the corner cell has it. So I was shocked, man. I couldn't believe it, man.
Word, that was good though. At least, what I mean? He was a cool dude though in that sense. He
was, man, but
that was crazy.
It's serious, man.
It's crazy because you would think since we all in here, you know what I'm saying, we here all doing time, we gotta see each other every day, it would be more calm, but obviously not.
It don't work that way, man. Unfortunately. Definitely. It should work that way, There's power in numbers, man.
Definitely. So look, before we go, tell the people where they can find your Freedom Fighters organization, all the links to you, so they know where to look you up if they want to send you any emails or contact you about anything.
They can find us on www.freedomfighters.com. You can email me at freedomfighterspc@gmail.com. And you can hit me on Facebook, man, Chad Marks, Rochester, New York. And hopefully that book will be out in a couple weeks, man, and people can get it and read it and go from there. But, man, hopefully we can start doing some stuff as people, man, and try to force the government to change the laws, man, and do what's right for the people.
Yeah, definitely, man. Especially doing things like this, bringing more awareness to it. More awareness we bring to it, the more people to know, the more numbers we have, and the more we can push on it to keep it going. And we definitely gonna have Chad Marks up here again. We definitely got more to talk about. Want to introduce y'all to this intelligent dude, intelligent story, and it's about fixing what's wrong, because right now this world is upside down, and hopefully we can spin it back the right way. But it starts with us, the people that's watching, people that's listening. No, I mean, information you hear here, you tell your friends, your family, because it starts with us. Change is here. We are the change we need, and we the motivation. People watching this hopefully get motivated to do, you know what I'm saying, something good for the people, whatever it is. We have to do good. Have to do good. It's the only way the world will get better. People out there rioting, people dying. We want to live. So thank y'all for tuning in. We had Chad Marks story. This gonna be up on YouTube. I'm gonna share it. We're gonna keep sharing it, and we're gonna keep this going, because you definitely got to make sure the peoples get the just due.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.